beyond government reach. And I think I just want to mention Rep. Dorsey's point about counterintuitive. In some ways it is. It seems ironic that a government, a legislative act would facilitate autonomy in the Fourth Estate, but that's precisely what it does because it is an independent and autonomous, nonpartisan entity so that this is not politicized. And we want more journalists, and we want to make sure that they are representing their field openly and professionally, and that transcends all the other high growth jobs that help the economy. This helps our democracy itself.
Thank you.
Representative Ledbetter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the good gentleman from Philadelphia County for bringing the legislation before us this morning. The good gentleman and I have served on various committees before, and the difference between his legislative district and mine are very stark, and because of that, we often find ourselves representing very different ideas. But I appreciate always the opportunity to have the collaboration that we do, whether it's on this committee or others. With that in mind, one of the concerns that I have is, again, coming from a very rural community representing a rural district, that the feedback is that once the state begins funding news, even with the so-called firewalls and the structures that are set up, the concern is that the blurring of that line then creates a press that is dependent on that government funding. And I appreciate the good gentleman's clarification to the 2 points of inquiry prior to me, but that does not set up by definition a more independent structure. It creates a less independent structure. And I think to the way that I consume news or some of the younger constituents that have come to me, Representative, and how they've consumed news, and when we consider the manner in which they are receiving it, many of the most trusted local information sources within our community are community run, they're nonprofit, faith-based, ethnic, or even volunteer-driven, and they succeed precisely because they are not an arm of the state and because they do not have certain guardrails in place. We see that across the country today with various points of protest where information that would have otherwise not been received without the technology of a cell phone now being widely distributed because everyday Americans can capture that information on a mobile device and then distribute it freely and in a decentralized manner. So I'll be opposing the legislation today, Mr. Chairman, but I want to be very clear that this is not about whether journalism matters. I agree with the good gentleman from Philadelphia County that journalism does matter. I have a daily paper in my district. But the question is whether government should decide which information ecosystems live or die, and whether taxpayers should be compelled to fund speech they may not trust, agree with, or even use. And so for that reason, I'll be opposing it today, but I'll look forward to potentially collaborating for a future floor vote.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I concur with my colleagues that it's absolutely essential that we have those voices that report on the legislature. In fact, I've been around this place for many years in various different capacities as constituent, as a business owner, and now as a state legislator. And what was always here in the Capitol, in a press room on the second floor, was media everywhere here in the Capitol, watching and writing on what they see firsthand. I concur with you. There is a huge problem that media now hears second, third-hand review of things which happen here. I don't see media up in the gallery. We definitely need more people to come and report firsthand on what occurs on a daily basis, what we vote on, what the subjects are. But you reference the Fourth Estate. Do you know what the other three estates are?
Is this a quiz?
No, I'm just curious.
No, I would love to hear.
So, I mean, it was traditionally meant how it was coined, and I may be corrected on this too, but the other was basically the nobility. The one estate was so it's nobility, it's the commoners, I guess was called, so constituents. So the general people is one estate, second estate nobility, and the third estate was clergy, which you can kind of say is government. So if you're looking to say that you want to have one of the three others fund the fourth estate, then it's really not an independent entity. And having government fund something that's supposed to be independent, it just seems inherently contradictory. So I concur that we absolutely need more media, more press. They need to be in this Capitol. They need to be reporting. They need to be here, whether it's 6 p.m., whether it's 9 p.m., whether it's during the day in the Capitol walking around the halls. But I don't believe that a government funding that would make anything more neutral. And so I concur with my colleague that said, is there anything that we can do to have more, encourage students to get in there, whether it's be teaching history, getting them engaged. I know I personally offer students in my district, and I continue to do this, to come and shadow me every day. That sort of stuff is just getting them engaged. Because I also concern that in this legislation, so here's my other question is, and if I may, Mr. Chair, my other question is who selects these scholarships?
There's a process in which that happens. So there is a board, there is an entity that does this in a way that is nonpartisan. And I think that's important, right? Because this can't be politicized. That is the whole point. I think we can agree on both sides of the aisle. This does not benefit if it looks like it is something that is an extension of government or an extension of electoral politics or so forth. So there's a process in which that happens that's in the bill. But I think the larger issue is government already funds newspapers and has for generations through sharing information. What is it called? The claims and such.
And how's that worked out?
In what respect?
I mean, if you look at, you're saying that government has funded these entities for a long time, but yet you're saying we need more government to fund this stuff when it's creating the problem. So, I mean, my saying is that more government is never the answer to bad government.
Right. This is not a mandatory thing. No one has to participate. It is an option. So this does not impact any entity that does not wish to participate. So this is not a requirement that newspapers are funded by government. And in fact, this entity would be an independent, autonomous organization. So
Funded by government.
Correct, just like so many things. But I guess the point is, it is not mandatory. So this has no influence on any entity that does not trust it, that does not want to participate.
Thank you. I personally believe that we need to have more journalists. I just don't think this is the way to do it. So thank you for your effort.
Thank you. Representative Day?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank my colleague for bringing this forward. I'm opposed to this legislation, and my colleagues have outlined most of the reasons why I am as well, so I'm not going to repeat what they said, but I think it's important that we've served together in the past, and what you are trying to do, and the previous speaker just said, the goal is a need that is out there, but the means which is written here, it reminds me of an economist that said, just where will we find these nonpartisan angels to run government, you know? And it's something that's always stuck with me, and I've seen since I've been in the legislature, and it gets worse and worse. It's at its worst right now in my career here in the state capitol, where we find that partisanship and bias leaks into these non-biased organizations that we try to set up. So I don't see the firewalls being as secure as you do, and that's the main reason why I'm opposed to this legislation, in addition to what my colleagues have said prior. So I think you deserve to hear why some people are against your legislation so that you can address these concerns and maybe continue to do the work that you're trying to accomplish by addressing the objections. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chairman, you want to share anything, or you're good? All right, let's call the roll. Noah? Yes. Yes, by designation. 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 Yes, by designation.
No. No by designation.
No.
No by designation. No by designation.
Thank you. The bill will be reported out of committee as amended. House Bill 2047 is reported from the House Communication Technology Committee as passing. Moving on to the next bill, House Bill 2048. Again, Representative Rabb presenting it. Alex, would you give an overview of the bill, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 2048 establishes the Pennsylvania Civic Information Consortium to support civic information and local journalism initiatives.
Thank you. Before we get to the amendment, would you like to speak about the bill itself?
Thank you, Chair. I think a lot of the conversation we've had kind of morphed into both bills because they're highly related. But at its core, this bill is about the First Amendment, not as an abstraction, but as a living promise. A free press is not a luxury of stable times. It is most essential when power is abused, when truth is distorted, and when silence is demanded. And make no mistake, across this country, we are witnessing coordinated attacks on journalists, newsroom closures engineered by consolidation, and political efforts to intimidate or discredit the press itself. This legislation is measured and is a constitutional response. It does not tell journalists what to say. It does not pick winners or losers. It protects the conditions under which a free press can survive: independence, pluralism, and public access to credible civic information. This work is personal to me. My great-great-grandfather, John Henry Murphy Sr., was a Civil War veteran in Maryland who in the 1890s founded the Baltimore Afro-American newspaper, still in existence today, one of the oldest continuously run family-owned newspapers in the country, because then Black communities were denied truthful coverage and a voice in mainstream media. He understood that democracy cannot function when people are kept in the dark. This bill carries forth that legacy, and I would really appreciate an affirmative vote today. Thank you.
Thank you. There is one amendment being offered up by Representative Waxman. It is A02379. Alex, please read about the amendment.
Amendment A02379 strengthens the independence of the consortium, amends the declaration of purpose, makes meetings subject to the Sunshine Act, and adds a definition.
Representative Waxman, you'd like to speak about your amendment? Are there any questions regarding the amendment? Seeing none, are there any negative votes on the amendment? And we will move to the bill. The amendment passes with no negative votes. On to the bill itself. Are there any questions on the bill? Reichert. Representative Reichert.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just very quick, sir. In my district, we have a couple newspapers that offer some coverage. We have the Chambersburg Public Opinion, which is now owned by Gannett. We have the Waynesboro Record Herald, which is owned by Gannett. We have the Greencastle Echo Pilot, which is owned by Gannett. So we have quote unquote local newspapers. If you were to get them and open them up, you would see that there's a lot of USA Today articles and some coverage out of York, which is 2 counties over from us, but not a whole lot of local coverage. But by definition, we do have local newspapers. How does this address that, right? I mean, is there a mechanism in there that goes through and takes a look at the newspapers and says, well, it's 90% outside news, but only 10% local? Is that how does it? I guess how would a newspaper, an entity, or an area qualify to be underserved and be eligible for these grants?
Thank you for your question. So underserved community is defined as a community that lacks adequate access to reliable civic information or local news, including rural, low-income, minority, immigrant, and limited English proficient populations. And so, to your point, something can be local on paper, no pun intended, but in fact be controlled by an entity that is by no means local. So I think there is a distinction between the ownership model and the content itself. So what is local news as opposed to what is local news ownership? The two are not the same. So to your point, which I strongly, I appreciate where your question is coming from. It is the content that this consortium can positively influence. So what is local, and what are the voices within that local community where that civic information can sprout up? What that looks like in a rural community may look very different in a suburban community or urban community, and there's diversity within each of those communities, irrespective of who owns it. So I think this consortium will have a very positive impact on the quality and expanse of the news content, irrespective of the ownership model. And that's something that presently is without our control or our ability to positively influence with the appropriate funding so that that capacity can be expanded.
So would this essentially, would it potentially be a grant to, say, Gannett to say, hey, go to Franklin County and maybe cover some local sports games? Or I mean, what would this look like? How would this promote the journalistic relevance in rural areas, I guess, in that sort of a model?
I think these are excellent questions, and this is precisely why we want to have an independent entity that facilitates what local news and civic information looks like. So I don't, as a member of government, I don't want to dictate what that is. If this is an independent entity, they can determine what that looks like. But to your point, if you have local media that does not cover local issues, that's a problem. This facilitates that. And again, this is not a mandatory government-imposed thing. This is an entity that would facilitate the very things that are lacking in various communities, or bolstering them to the extent that they need that help. We provide subsidies to farmers. We provide all kinds of support to any entities and industries and businesses we believe have a positive impact in our Commonwealth. This should be no different.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Representative Ledbetter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, thanks to the good gentleman from Philadelphia County for bringing this forward. Representative, your family's honorable work certainly is something that deserves reference, and I appreciate you sharing that with us this morning. I'm sure without the greater context beyond what you shared, they face significant headwinds during that period. And my concern with this program is that should a program or a tool like this have had existed then, within that systemic era, that this would have created more headwinds for your family's work to actually have been achieved. As these programs are developed, it's often easy for us to be idyllic in how they would be applied. But as elected officials, it's upon us to ensure that the ambiguity that my colleague just brought forward is addressed in the legislation. So that way the missteps of our past aren't repeated. So that way any systemic errors that would have been applied in a prior era would not then be distributed today. I think to our federal officials, if this was to be before them, whether it was grants for Blue Sky or Truth Social, I would share the same concerns I'm sharing with you all today. I would have a lot of concerns with government having a hand in subsidizing the arbiters of information within our communities. And I think that your story that you shared with your family showcases that despite those headwinds and despite the adversity, that there is a path forward, so that way the legacies that you've outlined can be created. So again, I'll be opposing this in committee today, Representative, but I'll look forward to future conversations because again, a free press is essential to our government, but a state-supported press or a state-funded journalism program is something else entirely. So I'll look forward to those future conversations.
Thank you, Representative. I appreciate your perspective. What a lot of people don't understand, particularly about the black press, was that it was created in spite the headwinds that you talk about. And so the fact that there's so few remaining, there's only one black-owned talk radio news media outlet in the entire state of Pennsylvania. My family built this business in the 1890s, and it was difficult because black people were invisible. The stories about us were mischaracterizing our contributions to society. They were marginalizing so many important accomplishments that today everyone embraces as though it was always the case. But they fought against systems of harm, and I think if this consortium existed, those headwinds would actually be significantly reduced because there'd be a level playing field and there would be a environment where we understood that voices from various communities had equal value. And that was something that until the 60s was not considered so. And so it is in that context where we are allowing an entity that is separate from government, albeit created by it, can facilitate the broad array of expressions, right-wing, left-wing, rural, urban, all of that, and let folks decide what is important to the respective communities. That's important. And also it's worth saying that there's a diversity, an ideological diversity within these communities, including the black press, where there were folks who were on different sides of the issue within the same community. And that's what makes a democracy flourish, is having those conversations and sharing that information and allowing people to make their own decisions without fear of government interference. And I also want to say we have a system now where we have a gentleman who owns X, who's using technology that has been facilitated largely by federal government, and it has produced some of the most awful content in terms of deep fakes of children in sexually compromised ways. Government has a role to make sure that media outlets are not purveyors of the worst things. So it's not as though the press has no connection to government and government has no responsibility to press. What is the most healthy relationship between these two things so that there is autonomy, there is a complementary dynamic there, but that we uphold the First Amendment in the most meaningful ways in times when people are very much concerned about what we can believe in the news, what civic information is getting there, and what kind of misinformation do we have to sort through to get to the truth. And I believe this is a tool that has worked effectively in New Jersey that can be brought to Pennsylvania in ways that Pennsylvanians can do something with to allow ourselves to flourish and get more information in the most meaningful ways. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you. Representative Gatos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and once again, thank you, Representative Rabb, for bringing this issue up, because we are in a crisis. You are absolutely correct. There is just no information out there that seems to be fair. You mentioned, right wing, left wing. Frankly, we don't want either. We want fair news, and that's something that I support. I actually spent a lot of time with a business. I did a lot of startup companies down in the Baltimore area, worked with the Greater Baltimore Committee, actually worked with the Afro-American newspaper, and just a remarkable group of people, remarkable history, and Murphy family. And so I had the opportunity to work with them and see the history and how it impacted Baltimore, and it was absolutely remarkable. How did they find and develop that publication? What was the origin of that, and where did they get their start?
My ancestor, through an investment from his wife, acquired a church reader. It was like a little newsletter. And that ultimately burgeoned into what became the Baltimore Afro-American newspaper. And the reason it was able to grow so quickly and strongly over decades is because there were so few news outlets that talked about Black people as human beings with agency and care as fellow citizens. And many people were illiterate. So Pullman porters, who were overwhelmingly Black men, would take this newspaper and they would travel across the country and they would share it with other people who didn't have news outlets that talked about Black life. So the Baltimore Afro-American newspaper, while local, actually had a national edition and an international edition. We sent people to cover the First World War and the Second World War. And the problem too was, in some parts of the country, the information in this newspaper that was just sharing information about Black life could get Black people lynched. So they had to hide my family's newspaper when they were sharing it when they were in the South, because the Southerners were afraid, the Southerners in power were afraid that an educated, informed Black population would be dangerous, and they were right. But we shouldn't have to worry about physical violence or political violence because of what you consume. No one should, irrespective of their ethnicity or religion or political affiliation. We need to create more space where more information that is trusted, that is vetted, can be shared in any community, however that community finds itself, but certainly geographic. We want to make sure that we have more freedom and more information so that people can make good decisions and not feel that the information they're getting is from the government, but it's from trusted organizations that may have some support from our own tax dollars, which is consistent with how we legislate every day, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. We fund so much, and a lot of people don't realize that. And I think it's really important that we make that same investment in the Fourth Estate.
Well, I mean, I think it's a remarkable story, and thank you for sharing it with us, because I think it is very important to how it grew, how it developed. And I come from the startup space. I work with startup companies. I personally think that there are a lot of things we can do to basically get government out of the way to enable them to do exactly what they did back then, as opposed to inserting more government in. And I certainly want to make a shout out to Spotlight PA, who we see the reporter Stephen Caruso here all the time. He's in the Capitol. He's at the top of the steps, whether we like it or not. But he's here. He's present. I'd like to see something that motivates actual reporters coming in here, clearing the level, leveling the playing field for businesses in general to get started, making it easier for these newspapers to function as a business. And I believe that that's the approach, instead of inserting government in. But again, your cause is noble, and thank you very much for sharing your story.
Thank you. Representative Day?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again, man. Your passion really has me fired up here. I'm excited for you. I still have concerns. What what you're talking about funding, I was curious, have you, this isn't self-eliminating just in itself, but I'm curious, has there been an effort to privately fund this idea?
Well,
And let me give you,
Yeah,
let me
please.
help you a little more. Let me help you a little more. What you're talking about, and if you sat before someone and did what you're doing now, I can't believe that this wouldn't be privately funded. Because it's obvious that there's a niche that you're connected to that would greatly appreciate this being funded. And anybody looking to invest in their community would know that there's a market that would be listening, and that creates a marketing opportunity for people to be answering the call of a public official or someone else in their community to be delivering what we're experts in, what our community wants, right? So my problem is what you're talking about as the issue, and what my colleague was just talking about as the issue here in the Capitol. Those things could be in this large structure that you are setting up, but also there could be all this other, what I would consider not good spending, and it would really blow up what's needed. So my first question is, was there any effort to do a private funding round or anything like that?
No, but the benefit of this amendment to 2048 is that it can receive funds beyond the government. So it's not just one place. And that's one of the benefits of having this structure, is that as an independent, autonomous entity, it does not just have to take money from the Commonwealth. It can take money from others. And there's examples of that already in statute, right? The authority term often allows for any entity, philanthropic, private, or otherwise, to invest in these types of entities. And I think that, to your point, that is a great opportunity because it allows people to show up beyond what the government deems is appropriate in terms of funding. So it's not a either or, it's a both and, which is why I'm so appreciative of the amendment.
To be respectful of everyone's time here in the committee, there's only two other points that I wanted to just touch on and ask you and try to get the information from. In our communities, there's private cable companies that do local journalism, local interest stories, programs. What's really big with the cable companies is selling cable TV by having local sports games and things like that. Would that be considered to be funded as projects? Because I come from the cable industry and it's quite expensive to do that. So would we be funding, putting on television local high school sports games and things like that? Do you think that would be approved?
I would have to defer to the prospective board that decides. That would not be for me to say. I think how they decide, I think that's precisely why I agree that government shouldn't be involved. Me as an elected official, I don't want to put my thumb on the scale there.
Well, they would. I know the industry well, and they would decide that would be, and it's very expensive. That's why I'm asking the question. And my final point is, do you have an idea of how much the launch of this would be? What would be, in your mind, appropriate government level of funding for this? Have you looked at what that would be?
Every state is different, and I don't want to give a figure right now, but this is absolutely something I can follow up with before it goes to the House floor to give you a sense of what this investment would look like. I don't want to undercut it but yes, I think we can get you a number to say, well, this is what a strong start would look like.
Thank you so much for the answers to these questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Representative Nelson?
Appreciate it. Listen, I personally am one, and thank you for these two pieces of legislation. When I hear the arguments that have been made so far, I am always wary of folks who want to get involved in politics for the money. I am wary of folks who want to get involved in faith for the money. I'm worried about folks who want to get involved in teaching just for the money. Is there a business case for getting involved in journalism and news media and local news? Sure. But we as a governing body should be concerned about folks who want to get involved in media just for the money. There is real responsibility on a governing body in ensuring that our media agencies and our local news is able to survive. We don't do enough of it. We're doing less of it now than we were 2 years ago. This is a wonderful and responsible, and I believe almost trying to preserve the First Amendment sort of package of bills that you're offering that say that local and real journalism is important, not what investors want as journalism. You shouldn't just turn this over to folks who want to do this for the money. I thank you. I'm looking forward to supporting this bill today and on the floor and getting this to the governor's desk.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Waxman?
Good morning, and thank you, Representative Rabb, for bringing forth this bill. I'm looking forward to voting for it. I just wanted to make a quick point, which is we have state-sponsored money flooding our journalism ecosystem. It is money that is coming from other parts of the world. I'll just use one example, which is Tenet Media. Folks may be aware of it. It's a U.S.-based company that had a bunch of influencers: Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, Benny Johnson. I think these are familiar names to some. And according to the U.S. authorities, the Russian state broadcaster RT, they put almost $10 million into this organization to push pro-Russian propaganda in the United States. This is just one example of how large money comes into the United States, funds our media ecosystem, but not for the interests of anybody here in this country. And so I think it's high time that we got off the sidelines and got into the game, and so I'm looking forward to voting for this bill.
Senator Riker?
I guess my follow-up on that last question is our government money any better?
What, is that for me?
No,
I think that
in all due respect, I don't think we need to really get into a debate on that one. You know, I don't want to use the gavel. Okay, Chairman. I want to thank you for this legislation. I think all of us in this room agree upon this, that the news media is extremely important for our society to understand what's happening and to be able to report on it. I wish there were more reporters in the room right now, and I wish that we would see this be a top article maybe in the local newspapers and on the news, that we discussed the need for journalism, not only in our state, but throughout the United States, and fair journalism that's not biased one way or the other, that just reports the facts. Some of us who are a little older in the room remember a time when that was journalism. We would watch the news, and it was not the journalist's opinion, it was what happened. And it allowed the people to decide for themselves what happened. And I think it's important that you're bringing this up at a time in our history when the way we get our news is nothing like it once was. When you ask our younger generation how they get the news, it's off of Instagram or Facebook or X or Snapchat. And you look at these stories and you'll go back and look and say, that's not news. I don't know where that came from. That's not real. As opposed to one time when you'd pick up a paper and read it, or watch Dan Rather, or way back when, Walter Cronkite, which was really before my time, but he was to the end of his career. All right, don't say that again. But, toward the end of the career when he would report. But seeing this and knowing that we want to put this back as a civics opportunity and be able to offer younger people the opportunity, again, to see real reporting on what it means is extremely important. So I want to thank you for this legislation. That being said, on the bill itself, Noah, can you call the roll? Yes. Yes, by designation. Yes, by designation. Yes, by designation.
Yes.
Yes, by designation. 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 Yes, by designation.
No. No by designation. No by designation. No by designation. No by designation.
House Bill 2048, with the amendment, will come out of the committee and as a yes vote and be passed on to the House. Thank you very much, Representative. Seeing there's no other business, I'd like to adjourn the meeting.